You know, when the nights grow long and darkness falls, it's often not the absence of light that really gets to us. It's the feeling that we've lost our meaning. We can get through almost anything if we just know why we're doing it. So, how do we find that why when everything just feels bleak? Well, the great psychoanalyst Carl Jung had a pretty radical answer for that. And right there, that's the central paradox we're going to unpack. See, Jung wasn't talking about that fleeting, surface-level happiness we get from distractions. Nope, he was pointing to something much deeper. A kind of unshakable joy that actually comes from the very parts of ourselves we try so hard to avoid. Our unconscious, our shadows. So much of our life is this chase for what you could call artificial happiness, right? It's totally external, it's fragile, and it really depends on us distracting ourselves. But true joy, the union kind, it's the complete opposite. It's an internal thing, built on being honest with yourself and integrating all parts of who you are. And because of that, it is absolutely unshakable. Okay, so how in the world do we get there? Well, the first step is completely counterintuitive. When everything inside of us is screaming to run outward, to distract ourselves, to find some kind of quick fix, the real path actually requires us to turn inward. It demands a descent. To even begin this journey, we first have to recognize the mask that, let's be honest, we all wear. Jung had a name for this, the persona. It's that polite, capable, smiling face we show our boss, our friends, even our own family. It's not that it's fake, not necessarily, but it is definitely not the whole story. It's the part of us we've carefully curated for public approval. And this forces us to ask a really tough but crucial question. What gets left behind that mask? You know, what part of your wildness or your grief or your unconventional thoughts have you tucked away just to keep the people around you comfortable? The answer to that is the doorway to what comes next. And this brings us to one of Jung's most famous ideas, the shadow. Now, let's be clear, this isn't some evil monster hiding in the closet. The shadow is simply everything about ourselves that we've decided is unacceptable and then banished from our conscious personality. It's our repressed fears, our unexpressed grief, our secret shames. But, and this is the key, the shadow isn't the enemy of joy. It's actually the gatekeeper. So, the most important thing to get here is this. Turning to face your shadow, going down into your own inner darkness, that's not a sign you failed. It is not a punishment. Jung saw it as a sacred invitation from your own soul, calling you toward a more whole, a more authentic life. So what does this path actually look like? Well, it usually starts when the ego, that outer shell of ours, starts to crack under pressure. And yeah, it's painful, but it's a necessary step. From there, we have to learn to treat emotions like fear not as intruders, but as messengers trying to tell us something. We start to listen for the symbols our psyche sends us. And then, finally, we can begin the work of welcoming these exiled parts of ourselves back home. Okay, so if we're going to make this journey, we're going to need a map and a compass. The problem is, the inner world doesn't speak English or any other logical language for that matter. It speaks the language of the soul. And this is how it communicates with us. Not with spreadsheets and data points, but with the strange logic of dreams, with powerful symbols that just grab your attention, ancient myths that all of a sudden feel deeply personal, those meaningful coincidences or synchronicities, and those undeniable gut feelings or creative urges you just can't explain. This is the new vocabulary we have to learn. Jung put an enormous amount of importance on dreams. He really saw them as direct, unfiltered messages from our deepest self, not as random nonsense to just be brushed off in the morning, but as vital guidance, especially when we feel lost in the dark. For example, one of his patients, who was in a really deep despair, dreamed of these glowing lights moving just under the surface of a vast, frozen lake. She was afraid to break the ice, but she felt them calling to her. The dream wasn't a literal solution, it was a symbol. That frozen lake, that was her numbness. But underneath it all, her life force, her potential, was still very much alive, just waiting. And it's not just our personal dreams either. Jung believed that ancient myths are basically the collective dreams of all humanity. You take a story like the goddess Inanna being stripped of everything she owns as she descends into the underworld. That's not just some old fairy tale. It's a map for what happens when our own ego is stripped away, and it shows us the path to being reborn. And all of this brings us to the ultimate goal of the entire journey. It's not about escaping the darkness or conquering the shadow or trying to live in some state of perpetual light. The goal is integration. The goal is wholeness. So, what even is integration? Well, you can think of it like the alchemical process of holding the tension of opposites within yourself without just collapsing. It's about accepting that you are both light and dark, strong and vulnerable, joyful and capable of deep, deep sorrow. The aim isn't to become some perfect, flawless being, but a complete whole one. Now, this leads to a pretty profound shift in how you see things. We're all taught to see joy and sorrow as enemies, right? Jung argued they're actually siblings. They belong to the same family of a life that's been fully lived. You simply cannot have true, deep joy without also having the capacity for deep sorrow. Consider this story. Another patient, lost in a cold, dark forest in a dream, didn't find a map out. Instead, a small, glowing fox came and just lay down beside them. It didn't solve the problem, but its presence was healing. That is Jung's vision of joy. It's not a solution that banishes the dark, but a warm companion that stays with you in it. And so we arrive at the final, crucial pivot. The work isn't about desperately searching for some external source of light to come and save you. The real invitation is to do the inner work required to become a source of light yourself. But you can't just flip a switch. To become a lantern, you have to venture into the darkness of your own psyche. You have to gather up all those forgotten pieces of your soul and realize that your inner light isn't something that defeats the night. It's something that is literally made from the experience of navigating it. And so we're left with one final, very personal question. This whole journey isn't really about finding happiness. It's about creating meaning. It's not about waiting for the dawn, but learning how to glow in the dark. So the real question isn't, can you find joy? It's, are you willing to do the work to become it? Are you willing to become a lantern?